I took the children to school on a Monday morning, just like any other morning. I work at their primary school, so I went into work just as a normal day. And then I started to get a headache, which I felt was like turning into a migraine. I managed to stay the day and do the children's tea as normal. And then in the early hours of the Tuesday morning, the following day, I started to get sickness and diarrhoea. I rang up my school to tell them I wouldn't be in. They told me another child in the class had it, so I just put it down to a sickness bug. And the next day, on the Wednesday, I started to get a stiff neck and photophobia. All my limbs started to ache as well, and I felt like I had the most terrible case of flu. And I remember thinking to myself, well, these are the symptoms of meningitis. But at no point did I think that I had meningitis. I just felt there safe in the knowledge that this is what happens to other people. My mum was worried. It was then that my mum called the ambulance. So I went into Warwick Hospital, and when I got there, the doctor said to me, "Don't worry, we don't think it's meningitis, but if it is, it will just be viral. But we'll keep you in overnight and we'll treat you for it anyway." I have very, very patchy memory of what happened then. I remember them trying to do a lumbar puncture, and I know they couldn't do it. And I remember the light streaming in through the hospital windows, and I remember being wheeled somewhere. I remember looking down at my legs, and I had all this mottled rash all over my legs, and I remember thinking, gosh, that's not good. Then I just remember all these doctors around me, and then I couldn't breathe, and I remember just absolute panic. And I was thinking, they don't know that I can't breathe and they need to help me, and I was pleading to a nurse who was one side of me, sort of begging her to help me. There was a voice on my other shoulder, and he just said, "Don't worry, you're going to go to sleep now." And they put me in a induced coma, and I stayed in a induced coma for about 3 weeks. During that time I was transferred to Coventry Hospital, to a major trauma centre. And my first real memory was when my children came to see me for the very first time, and it was actually Lily's birthday, and I remember them coming and they were allowed to brush my hair, and I remember desperately trying to stay awake for them. I couldn't speak because I had a trachea put in me. I couldn't move at all, couldn't support my own head. I stayed in hospital for 4 months. During that time I had the trachea removed, and I learned to sit up and walk again, but my skin was badly damaged from the septicemia as well. Well, meningitis has affected me physically, so I've lost all my toes. I have partial hand amputation on my left, and I've lost my digits on my right. I'm now registered disabled. I had to learn to do everything for myself again. I had to learn to sit up again. I had to learn to walk, very basic things. I learned how to, hold things differently, a fork differently. The clothes that I wear is completely different. Buttons, zips are difficult. Cooking in the kitchen, I have to have different utensils to help me. Hoovering, it's just very basic things. It's affected me in every way possible. From the purse that I use, it's very difficult for me to use get money out of my purse. In every way you can imagine, it has affected me. Also, obviously, emotionally, you're quite scarred from the psychological trauma that you've been through. It's affected my family in so many different ways. When I first went into hospital, Katie wouldn't go to school for that day because she could see that I was poorly and she was worried about me. And she saw me going into the ambulance, and then I didn't come back for 4 months. So that has a lot of effects, she was only 11 at the time, on a young girl. And Lily, and Lily was only 8 at the time, and she went off to school and said goodbye to me, and then came back, and I wasn't there. And again, she didn't see me for a month. And obviously, along with my husband, he obviously saw me and visited me in intensive care every single day. He was told both at Warwick and at Coventry that I had very little chance of survival, and to bring the girls in to say goodbye. He felt that I would always pull through. He always had faith. So he never did tell the girls that, thankfully. And he never did bring them in to say goodbye to me. So to be told that about your wife, something you love, is very difficult. And my family live with the effects of meningitis every day. There's just so many ways that the girls and Paul has to help me now. You know, when we're cooking the tea, they have to come and open tins or open jars. When I'm putting the washing out, the girls have to carry the washing bag outside because it's too heavy for me. So many different things. When I was in hospital, in Coventry Hospital, a support worker came out to see me in hospital. He talked to me about Meningitis Now, the charity. When I first came out of hospital, I didn't know anybody that had meningitis. I felt very alone, and I did also think that somehow it was my fault, that I must have done something wrong, and that's why I contracted it, because nobody else around me had got it, so the fault must have lain with me. And so I carried that around for quite a long time, until I looked at the Meningitis Now website and I read a lot of the personal stories, and I saw adults on there that had meningitis, and I thought, well, they're the same as me, and they didn't do anything wrong, and that person's the same as me. So it gave me comfort in thinking that maybe I didn't cause this, maybe it wasn't my fault. Had it not been for Meningitis Now, having their support network, I think I still would have felt very, very alone. I went to a Rebuilding Futures Day with Meningitis Now about a year after I had meningitis, and it was so useful to me because I got to meet with other adults that had meningitis. You can talk about it freely because that's what people talk about amongst other people who understand. I met a chap actually that had been on the same hospital ward that I had in Coventry, and it was just so nice to share similar experiences. The chap that I was speaking to had it 3 years previous, so I looked to him and I thought, well, that's where I will be. I will get there. Just to feel part of the family. So it was lovely, just what I needed. When I came out of hospital, I was very focused on getting better and trying to get back to some sort of normality, and I pushed to one side what had happened to me and just focus on getting better. After about 2 years, I started to realise that this was possibly as good as I was going to get, and it was then I started to question what had happened to me, what happened to me in hospital, and a lot of questions started to bubble to the surface, and I started having a lot of flashbacks. So I contacted Meningitis Now and I inquired about counselling, and they were fantastic. It was arranged really quickly, somebody very local. Well, I just wanted to give the message out there that although meningitis is a terrible disease, it doesn't mean that it's the end. Since coming out of hospital, I've learned to drive. I drive an automatic car. I've gone back to work, which is fantastic because it gives you a completely different focus. Life has gone back to relatively normal, although in a completely different way. I live a completely happy life with my 2 children and my husband. So it's not the end. There is always hope out there.